Things happen in Philadelphia, bad things.
To the 40, 35, into the 30, cut back 25, into the 15, 10, 5, touchdown!
This is the best bad idea we have, sir.
And that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so.
Bad things happen in Philadelphia.
All right. We are live. Sorry about that little delay. We are live. We are the Driveway Athletes and Philly Sports Alliance, broadcasting in both places today. Talking a little fantasy football. A lot of news has happened over the last couple of days and a little bit today. Some injuries and other stuff. I realized that this weekend is probably the biggest draft weekend of the year. If you drafted last weekend, sorry, I didn't pop on and give you a live show before you drafted. But we're here. We're here to talk fantasy football. One thing I wanted to do, because I spent a lot of time over the last 2 days reworking ranks and looking at ADPs and expert consensus rankings and all of the above and reshuffling my stuff on, was to go through and one is open up to any questions for anybody who's watching if they wanted to ask me anything as they prep for their draft. But two is also to go over how I see ranks, how I see putting these players in order, and how I see how you should use them. Because I think that for you guys that might be watching and have been doing fantasy football for a little while, or maybe just got into it not that long ago, but you don't watch or listen to any podcasts about it, you don't quite, I don't think that there was a little bit of a how-to or how you should, like how this should work or what this should look like. So I wanted to pop on and give my 2 cents about that. Is I'm not going to run down, 150 to 200 player names. I don't think that that's fully productive. You can find my ranks. You can find other folks' ranks. But I just wanted to go through and talk about kind of what ranks mean to me and why I, what way I use them myself. So one thing I did reluctantly is I went through and did a list of the top 153 players, I believe is what it ended up being. And I don't like ranking players straight down from 1 to 150. From 1 to 150. What I really like is looking at players by position, because when you're building your fantasy team, you're building a team. Billy, I think last time we went through and we talked about how I don't even put kickers in my ranks. I actually don't put defenses in my ranks either. They tend to be the two positions that no one really pays much attention to. Putting them in an order of when you're taking positional players. If you want to be the first guy to take a defense, more power to you. It's not necessarily how I recommend to draft a team. So I will not talk about my number one kicker, even if it might be Young Ho Koo. So I reluctantly went down and did the top 153. That's just how it broke down when I did 50 wide receivers, 50 running backs, 20, and then I threw some extra in there. So, but I know that people use that as a straight list when they're drafting and they like to go down their list. And I don't necessarily know that that's the best way to draft. So, personally, when I did that top 153 in the way that I recommend using a top, you don't have to use my ranks. If you want to, they're available on drivewayathletes.com. Who plays in a dome the most, right? Or who plays at Mile High? It's not even Miles High, it was a Coors Field. Who plays in Denver, right? Who plays in a dome, or who plays at that high altitude, and everything else be damned. But so if you're going to use that straight ranks, that if you use someone else's ranks, that's fine. No offense taken. If I highly recommend using Fantasy Pros. There's another show / website I like to use called Fade the Noise. They're perfectly good source, as is Fantasy Points and the Fantasy Footballers. I I it wasn't a conscious choice. It just happened to be, sometimes you get a little crazy with you want to make sure some player ends up on your list. And you don't want to leave them out. So it just ended up being a crazy way to throw it in there. Some of those are like when I added the rookie quarterbacks. Some of that is when I added some deeper wide receivers. I wasn't going to hold myself to a set number. It's just when I felt good at stopping. But point being is, when you're going down your draft list, when you're at your draft and you're going down your list, whoever you're going to use, if you're going to use that all positions, only on the midday, never on the evening, wheel and box. So little inside joke Billy and I have when we worked at a liquor store and how many lottery tickets we would have to sell to people that played every day and how specific they are. But anyway, if you're going to run down that list, you could, as I said, you can use anybody's ranks, no offense taken. But for me, when I put my ranks together, and if you look at them, you're going to see a lot of variance. And I put in there the average draft position that's going in mock drafts up until today. And then I did the expert consensus ranking, which was pulled from Fantasy Pros, who takes all the experts and puts them in and compiles a consensus ranking. It's a very good website for finding a whole lot of information if you're a data person. So you might see some variance, but what's interesting is that the variance can kind of be, if we only look at the player, not necessarily the position. So somebody like I have Aaron Rodgers as my 4th ranked quarterback. He's not exactly like plugged in where quarterback 4 would be, but you're going to see a 30 player swing because he's my number 4. So I guess my point is why I thought it was a good idea to discuss this, give you guys a live show and not a pre-recorded show where we can give and take. I said variance, not variant. So that is, you want to go through and you want to find, sorry, car alarm was going off. Took me out of rhythm. Anyway, you want to know where the variance, not variant, variance is in the ranks, if you see them the same, and how you would shuffle them otherwise for you. But for me, like something I've noticed about myself is if you do an online draft, the software can sway you. And if those ranks don't jibe with what it is your rank is, or you don't understand why they're there, well, they're there in an order. So what I tried to do is like break it up in a way that I want to see what players I like in certain ranges, or what players I'd pop into certain ranges, or where it's a free pass to take this player if they're there. Obviously, you shouldn't just go down your list. And if you took Patrick Mahomes in the 2nd round and then you see the next quarterback is available, well, obviously I wouldn't recommend, unless you're in a 2-quarterback league, to just go down that list and select a quarterback. You have to own a little bit of decision-making for yourself and how you're going to build your team, because that's mostly what the ranks are supposed to be, a guide to help you build a team. But you've got to look at them and think, well, maybe I like, I'll take 2 players that are of similar, they both were drafted this year. And, in Philadelphia, I like Devonta Smith more than I like Jalen Waddle. Or if it's a reverse, I like Jalen Waddle better. Well, they might be ranked similarly. And if you're just going to go down the list, you're not really going to figure out what it is you prefer. And I think that the opportunities to listen to podcasts, you can hear a little bit of our feelings. We have to when we put a ranks list together, we have to put players in a certain order. Now, every order is not equal. Every, as you go down your list, some guys end up higher because they have better upside. Some guys end up lower because the floor's lower, or the offense is unclear, or their role in the offense is unclear, or there's an unclear position, Teddy Bridgewater was just named the starter in Denver today, right? Well, you might not feel so strongly about drafting Jerry Jeudy now. Because what kind of quarterback Bridgewater is. He's a competent quarterback, but he's not he's not necessarily throw it down the field guy. And those kind of receivers suffer a little bit. under a quarterback like that. So you have to know when you're looking at those players, you not that you need to know the name, the numbers behind the name or the offense behind the name, but you do need to have a little bit of a baseline knowledge about how players ended up where they are. And when you build your roster, is it necessarily that you want the player just because they're ranked there or what they represent? So again, for example, would be, again, when you're in more of your decision-making mode, when you're in more of that like fourth and fifth round and you're really starting to build your team, you might want, I think that this one player is a really good name, is Deontay Johnson. And say you're weighing him against taking a Brandon Ayuk. Right. I think that those are two good names to prove my point. They're separated in my ranks by Ayuk falls in overall 57 and Deontay Johnson is overall 43. But how I build my team might change how I draft them. So it's not just necessarily, there's a 14-point difference or a 14-place difference. I might wait 2 rounds to take this player or wait around and a couple picks. If you need a volume receiver, that's Deontay Johnson. He's not necessarily a big play guy. He's a volume guy. He's going to get a lot of catches, provides a nice floor, provided he doesn't drop the ball at the same rate he did last year. Where Brandon Ayuk represents a pretty high upside, right? If Trey Lance ends up starting pretty early, he's the focal point of that offense. He should get a good amount of touchdown looks. He's a big play guy. So when you're looking at those two players, you can't always look, well, which one is positioned where, but what is it that my team needs? Like if I took a more risky wide receiver in the first 2 rounds, if I took an AJ Brown who's currently hurt, if I took a more risky player, well, do I want someone with a pretty safe floor? And safe when you're talking about round 4 and 5 is relative. But do I want someone with a safe floor? Deontay Johnson, at least for all intents and purposes, looks like a high volume receiver. He was last year. He's looked that way in camp. He's looked that way in preseason. So when you're building your team, you need to do a little bit of this math about where have I gone. This is another reason I don't really like straight ranks. I do it because people want it. And I do, it's a good exercise for me to go through to get a feel for where, like when I'm looking down a list of 4, 5, 6 names, what is it that I prefer? But I don't like drafting with that. I like drafting with it broken down by position. I think that that's better. And I used to really swear by tier ranks. I think that they're good, especially when you're trying to get when you don't have a good grip on who's who. It's a good way to try and group guys together. But I'd really like drafting with your positional breakdown and going down a little bit more that way, because how your team is constructed is not going to be how those straight ranks end up, not just by rank, but by position. If you took a tight end early, well, you might not need to worry about a tight end for very long if you're going to draft a second one at all. So not just you have to be wise with how you're going down your list, but you have to be wise with how you build your team, which is a good segue kind of in this discussion. One thing I like when it comes to the one positions, quarterback and tight end, I'm not going to sit here and say always draft them late. There's certain guys that you do want to draft early, but if you only have to start one and the guys you don't feel like you'd rather load up at receiver and running back, here's your free pass. Do it. You only need to start one. The tight ends, once you get beyond Hawkinson, I guess, they all become really touchdown dependent. Really, I would say once you get beyond Waller or Kittle, they become very touchdown dependent. So, they might fall in where you go, well, this guy's really fallen. You've got him up at, 40 and he's down at, or we're now at pick 60 and he's still there. Yes and no. You have to look at how your league runs and how you feel about taking it. So it really pays you to listen to what folks have to say about their ranks. Or if they have things written about the players in there, because upside and and floor and ceiling and offense and different things weigh, at least for me, when I make my rank, different things weigh on where I'm going to put a guy. And I put them in the straight ranks. I put them in an order that I want to see them as a block of like 5 to 10 players when I'm up. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to cross off an order. It's just that I want to see a couple receivers if that's the position I need. I want to see a couple receivers. I want to see a couple running backs. I want to see who's grouped in this area that are kind of similar. Who do I like more? Whose offense do I like more? What player do I like more? What player do I think is poised to have a bigger role or have a smaller role? For example, a guy like Mike Davis is a middle of the rounds running back, right? He's slotted to be a number one back on the Falcons offense, but he's never carried the ball more than 180 times in a season. Well, if I waited at running back, like, sure, it's great to say like, all right, I got a number one back. There's not really a ton of things to hang your hat on that he's going to be able to do it all season long. Right. So is that the guy you want to put your hat on, or do you want to take a guy a little bit more risky who's not the number one, but who provides you is maybe on a better offense, or maybe has a better, a better history or a different role, right? Like maybe you want Myles Gaskin, like earlier in the season, I was a little lower on Gaskin because I expected them to take a running back or to pick up or a free agent. They really haven't brought another name in. Chris, you're late to the show. Billy asked me for my number one kicker before I even got started. So I was laughing that both of you decided you had to break my stones. If you know me, guys, if you've heard me, I think fantasy. So I said at the last live show, I'll say it again. Fantasy or kickers in fantasy is like playing poker with wild cards. At some point, it's time to grow up. You do no research about the player. You do nothing. It's the guy you usually take with your last pick or your next last pick, or you're somebody that thinks they're smarter than everybody else, and you take Justin Tucker or whatever in the 10th round because that's the difference between winning a championship and not. If you have kickers in your league and you run the league, get rid of them. Get rid of them, unless you like playing poker with wild cards. And if you're in case, I don't know what to tell you. It's time to grow up a little bit. You do all that research on your matchups and injuries and all of that, only to maybe lose because someone's kicker had 6 field goals because the offense couldn't punch it in. And it's not predictable. And it's not, and it's just, introducing a wild card. That's all it is. So if that's the way you like to play, okay, I guess. But that's all it is to me. All that research you do at other positions, all that stress you do about setting your lineup, and for what, to lose to a kicker. At least someone made a decision to put a running back in. A kicker, they just grabbed whoever was playing, or whoever was available. If you're telling me you're scouting kickers, I'm sure you could find something better to do with your time. But that's my rant about kickers, I guess, hopefully, unless Billy and Chris want to make me keep going. So I really wanted to make sure I came on one to give everybody a chance to, if they had actual questions about thought processes or drafting strategy or whatever, to talk about ranks, how to read them, and what to look for. I think that it's good to do something more. Obviously, I went through and ranked, 153 to 155 players. So obviously, I think it's good to do your research. You can check out my ranks. I have a write-up about a bunch of players. Obviously, you can ignore the write-up about ETN. Sony Michel right now still hasn't. He's still not high. Let me see. Let me look at my list because I did edit it. So if you guys don't know, I'll give you the first name. ETN's done for the year. I moved James Robinson up to running back 21. Sony Michel, I put it running back 42. That's running back 42, not 42 overall. Okay, but if you lose, it's your fault. But I had put Sony Michel in there in the 40s. Look, all reports are he looked good in camp, that maybe it was his best camp in a little while. So sure. I still think you're going to be looking at a split backfield. Henderson probably, I mean, I don't know if there's further reports about his thumb. I know that he was in a non-contact jersey. I expect him to miss. I expect him to miss a week or two, and we'll see. So Jobber McGillicuddy. So top 5 backs right now are, I think Christian McCaffrey is pretty much everybody's consensus number 1. Dalvin Cook I have at number 2. Alvin Kamara 3, Derrick Henry 4, and I have moved Saquon Barkley to 5. That assumes that Saquon Barkley is ready week 1. If not, I'd be comfortable with moving, take your pick of Chubb, Elliott, or Jones. If Barkley's not ready for week 1. Barkley just represents explosion that not everybody has. So we'll see how good the Giants offensive line is right now. I think Aaron Jones is, it's not just me. It's not just me. If you look at expert consensus ranking, I am pretty close to in line with where Aaron Jones is. Now you have to remember, when we're talking about straight up ranks, there is the amount of you're allowed to take the player you like. Aaron Jones, as far as expert consensus, is at 7 in standard. He is also at, let me change it to full point PPR. He's at 8. So that's not just me. You don't have to take my word for it. Look, here's the thing. This is the point. And if you made it earlier, when I talked about tiers, Aaron Jones falls in a grouping. You can very well make the argument that he could be 4. You could very well make the argument he should be 7. I'm in line with, there's another show. He wasn't number 1 overall. The number 1 fantasy running back last year was Alvin Kamara. Derrick Henry was 2. So it's fine. You don't have to. There's plenty of other places you can go to find information. But I'm telling you where the consensus is. You're more than welcome to find your own experts to rank people where you want them to be or make up your own. But I'm giving you where he stands for my list. Where he stands on my list and where he stands expert consensus. So that is where it is. You're more than welcome to make up your own ranks if you're that upset about 2 spots. But it's important to see. Like, some people have Elliott at 3, and some people have Aaron Jones at 3. But this is why you not only do ranks, but you should look at them before your draft. You should also make sure you print your ranks for your right scoring system. Most of my ranks are developed using half point per reception. It's a good way for me to split the baby. So between standard and half point. So it's a good way to come up with that with the ranks there at the list. Okay. So when you're looking through, make sure you know what ranks the person you're reading have used and how they see the players, whether, again, they fall in through for upside, but the one we need right now too, right? So whether it's upside, whether it is floor, whether it's ceiling, whether it's offense, whether it's offensive line, whether it's role in the offense, whether it's talent, right? Like Barkley falls in there for me for talent. That's really, good exercise to do is to look through about like, what's important to you. I always talk about the 3 pillars. which is talent, offense, and opportunity. Talent we can pretty much evaluate pretty easily. Offense and opportunity sometimes are about what we want them to be, not always what they are. If you look at Clyde Edwards last year, right? The offensive line wasn't very good. The opportunity was great for the first 6 to 8 weeks. And then after that, it had kind of died out. So one thing you have to do is when you're going to weigh those three pillars, when you weigh those three pillars on there, you want to make sure that they go for that they are what they are and not what you want them to be. So we hear a lot of times where we want the offense, right? Like for me, earlier in the offseason, I wanted ETN. I thought ETN was a more explosive player. I wanted him to be the player. Obviously, now he's hurt. But I also have to look at what the offense is telling me, what the coach is telling me with how they wanted to go about it. So you have to actually look at what it is, not just what you want it to be. That being said, all off-season coach speak is hard to actually make sense of. Everybody is in the best shape they've ever been. Everybody's in look the best. They are the healthiest they've ever been, and all of that. So sometimes you want to pull some of that noise away, and sometimes you want to listen to when it's negative, you should take it seriously. But also this preseason, just like last year, is a little bit of a preseason like no other. So don't go off the rails about usage too much, because we don't really know how predictive this is going to be. Yes, Barkley plays on the Giants. Gibson is currently going early second round. Barkley represents a high-risk pick. You'll never hear me say anything different. Right now, in points per reception, Billy, it looks like Davante Adams, as far as expert consensus, is pick 4, where Aaron Jones is pick 8. Aaron Rodgers is my number 4 quarterback. I'm higher than the rest of the expert consensus on that. Like there is an amount that we do have our favorite players, or reasons why we put players in different orders. It just is. We always have to try and do that, hopefully, with as clear a head as we can and not play our favorites. Green Bay looks like it's going to have a very solid offense. Right now, Aaron Rodgers, I just did the or the average draft position because I ended up being a lot higher and I wanted to put it down. But Aaron Rodgers is probably, he might still be, he's currently going pick 63, depending on your size league. You could take a stab at where he's going to go. But right now, average draft position through all the draft software is pick 63. So depending on your size league, that's a 6th round pick. If you're in a 10-team league, it's a 3rd pick. So I do too. He's basically free. I like Jameis. I like that kid Marquez Callaway. Looks like a nice little player. And believe it or not, for another free quarterback, I like some version of taking Trey Lance for free for when he takes over that starting role. The rushing quarterback, it's a bit of a cheat code for quarterbacks because you get 1 point for every 10 rushing yards. It's free points. It's why Kyler Murray is my number 2. I actually think Tua has looked really good in camp. Jameis right now, because they haven't named a starter in drafts, he's basically free. So Sean Payton seems to know how to coach an offense fairly well, regardless of who his quarterback is. It looks like Jameis has won the job. We'll see if that ends up being the case. But if he has, absolutely. I would agree. The only thing I will say about Ben is last season he averaged about 6 yards per attempt, very low, towards the bottom of the league. But we have Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Najee Harris. They're all top 50 picks. If they're good, then Ben's got to be good, because we're not betting on Dwayne Haskins being good. I can't imagine. So while I agree, I think that we've been talking about the last ride of Ben for like 4 years now. We've been talking about the last ride end for 4 years now. He's not really throwing very deep for the last couple years. We'll see. But he has to. If we're betting that Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris, Chase Claypool, and even Juju are going to be good, well, then Ben has to be good by default. And I don't like the phrase avoiding. Ben is basically a free player. So if you decided that you were just going to wait at quarterback and you're going to take a shot at 2 different guys, I'll take the guy that's got 4 players going in the top 60 picks. Ben did apparently lose a lot of weight. That has been the reports all along, but he's taken a pounding. His whole career, he's taken a pounding. So we'll see if he's just done. I've been worried about Matt Ryan as well. He didn't, towards the end of the season last year, look like he was breaking down a little bit. But Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts all look like they're going to be good players. So again, Matt Ryan, kind of a free quarterback right now. If it fails, it didn't really cost you anything. I think that when it comes to my phrase for tight end, and I lifted it, and I wish I could give credit, but it's basically, if you don't go great, go late. If you don't get one of those top 3 to 4 guys, you might as well just wait and load up at another position that's not as touchdown dependent, that you can find some good value. And when it comes to quarterback, you really want a running quarterback. You really want a guy who can rack up some points for you. It was fun. You really want some guy that's going to rack up points for you. And if you can't get that, take a guy who's poised, who either has weapons or is poised to that can take a big step. That's, like I said, Tua or Trey Lance. Especially once Trey Lance gets named the starter, there's a very good chance that he could get a lot of rushing yards. When it comes to Tua, what looks like they want to run a little bit of an up-tempo offense. Tua in college, that was his big thing. Take a couple steps back, get rid of the ball as fast as possible. They put a lot of weapons around him. So for a free quarterback, if I've waited or I'm not necessarily happy with the guys that I had before that, I do like taking Tua late. Again, if it doesn't work out, you drop them. We talked about Jameis a little bit, another player right now that if you would have asked me earlier in the offseason, I swore, even as of last week, I swore that Taysom Hill was going to be the starter. Sometimes, again, what we want to happen or what we think is going to happen doesn't always happen. So what I wanted to make sure when I came on and did a live show was just talking about how you should view rankings. We got off on a little bit of a tangent about specific players, but I did want people to be able to ask questions and have some live feedback. If you're betting single games, not for you, Mr. Thomas. Matt House, this is strictly for fantasy and really talking about people getting ready for their drafts this weekend, or, I guess starting tonight or going through the weekend. So this is not a straight up betting show. Sorry. Too rich for my blood. But again, I'm not the biggest fan of straight ranks, even though that's how the software goes. Madden can help you learn every player. I will not argue that point. It was a way for me when I was in my 20s to make sure that I was kind of on top of where everyone was and who everyone is and how good they are, at least as far as the beginning of the season goes. But again, so there are 3 ways you can do your ranks and look at them when you come to your draft day. obviously, if you're online drafting, there's going to be draft software that is going to have players in a certain order. Typically, I would advise you to use ranks that you agree with or that you feel comfortable with. And I would advise you to use ranks that you've looked at before you sat down at your draft. And hopefully that you've heard the person that you're using talk about the players that are ranked. So sometimes we hedge. Sometimes we don't really like a guy. We have to put him in a certain order because you don't want to look, like you're too low on somebody or you don't believe in somebody when clearly they're going to have some fantasy value. Everybody, no matter what, has fantasy value. It's just if your fantasy value lines up with where they are in the ranks or where they're being drafted, what market value is. So I highly recommend using the straight up ranks by position. So your running backs, 1 through however many you need, depending on how deep your league is, your wide receivers, your quarterbacks, your tight ends. If you wanted to, having those broken down into tiers, so you knew when to look at position, crossing over positions, or how players are grouped together. Because for some people, when they do tiers, they say everybody in this tier is pretty close to equal. So if you like, player who's at 5 and player who's at 9, well, they're both kind of the same. So you can take them in the same range. It's not fully, I try to use tiers to group like players together, not necessarily players that I feel are basically of the same talent, offense, or opportunity. But it is a good way to look for when there is a break. Maybe I look at wide receiver over here. Maybe I look at tight end over there. Or, who do I like going here or there? So I really don't recommend just using the straight ranks. Again, I did them. And I'm telling you, I did them because people asked for it. That's the way a lot of people drafted. So I took those top 100 ranks and I plugged them. If you use ESPN, if you use NFL, which I did today, you can go and adjust your ranks to your liking. It was a time consuming exercise, but I'm not saying you have to use my ranks. I'm just saying it would be good to do because you tend to view people in the order that you see them. Even if there's certain players that you like, when they're in a certain order, it does sway your opinion. We're all human. So I would recommend to look at them, whatever software you use, or draft software you use. If it's a online draft, I believe I do 3 drafts. 2 out of 3 are online. 1 is in person. And I just think that that's where it's all going because you can get a draft done in, an hour and a half versus 4 to 5 hours. I do miss getting together with everybody, but it is what it is. So again, I just wanted to pop on here, talk a little bit about ranks, talk a little bit about how they come together, what we use them for, how to use them, and really what I believe they should be used. Because as I started to show off with, I think that I've been doing this for about 20 years. I've been playing fantasy football. And I think up until about 5 years ago, maybe 6, that's kind of the way I did is I just printed out my list and I just crossed off as I went down. And I didn't, I think it's about 6 years ago. And I didn't I just went down that straight order. And I will say, I had mixed bags of success. When I had 6 years ago, when I changed where I get data from, where I changed how I use it, when I changed how I draft and how I rank, I have had a lot more regular success. Again, to be perfectly honest, I'm in 3 leagues. I think that is a good medium. I think anything more, it's almost impossible to manage. I think 3 is a good number. Some people do many more. I don't know how they have the time or patience to do it. Plus, I want to provide you guys all with content all season long. So really, if you guys have any further questions, go ahead and you can shoot them to drivewayathletes@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Instagram. You'll see clips of the different podcasts, which normally the fantasy football ones will upload on Thursday and Friday. The podcast version of this show will be up tomorrow. And then we will be back with some more content and discussing some more things tomorrow on the audio only. If you enjoy the live show, if you would prefer more live shows, again, send me a Facebook message. Hey, it's actually easier for me to see it this way, or hey, it's actually better for me to do this. Just listening to audio only, I feel like I'm missing something, whatever. I have no problem changing the format, but it is easier for me to do audio only. I find it to be a little less involved. But that being said, you're catching me, Jack, I think is what I used here, or Griff. As you can see my name tag right there. Driveway Athletes is my website. I also do a hockey show with Paul and Chris called the Tendies on Pattison, the Talking Flyers Hockey. Right now we're on hiatus because there's not all that much hockey news going on. But as I do on that show, if you guys watch those things, I always bring up the lineup of Philly Sports Alliance. They're kind enough to let me cross over and do some fantasy content here and there. So I'm going to bring up the show list for Philly Sports Alliance before I sign off. Again, drivewayathletes.com. You can find the ranks. You can find printable rank sheets, broken down by position with bye weeks, broken down into tiers, and then the straight up top 153 players, if that's the way you prefer to do things. The link is not a virus, I promise. I use Squarespace. They're not the best with PDFs, so I've got a link to a Google document. I promise it is not a virus. That's where you can find my ranks. If you want to find, we're Driveway Athletes on Facebook, Driveway Athlete 1 on Twitter, Driveway Athletes on Instagram. That's how you can find us, or drivewayathletes@gmail.com. I put a link to my Teespring store. If you like the content, you decide you want to check out what I have to offer there. Obviously, I do most of this stuff for free, but if you wanted to get some merch to support this side endeavor of mine, please go ahead and do so. Otherwise, we are sponsored by Monkey's Uncle, a store in Doylestown. We are sponsored by La Terrain Watches. If you use coupon code PSA, you will get a discount. Otherwise, here is the overlay for Philly Sports Alliance and their show lineup. Today is Wednesday. Bald Eagle goes on very soon. Mike Sports, 8 o'clock. Tennies on Pattison on hiatus, but normally Thursdays at 5:30. Tables, Ladders, and Chairs, 7 p.m. Football Stack Talk Show, 6 p.m. On Monday. Monday also has the Diamond Club, a Phillies podcast, 7:30. Tuesday is the Philly Broadcast, 6:30. It's a 4-for-4 show. I'd imagine with Eagles stuff coming up soon. That is what they're talking about. Billy, if you need a watch, you heard it. La Terrain Watches. Go on. Use coupon code PSA. Otherwise, guys, we will see when I'll be back, but I will be back with more fantasy content. Or you can search wherever you get your podcast for Driveway Athletes. You can find a whole bunch of other content where we talk about ranks, where we talk about your draft order, when we talk about ADP, rounds 4 through 8, rounds 1 through 4, wide receivers ranked 1 to 24, running backs 1 to 24, quarterbacks 1 to 20, tight ends 1 to 20. We've been recording all off season. So if you just found us, thanks to PSA, go ahead and search wherever you get podcasts for Driveway Athletes to find more fantasy content. Otherwise, see you guys the next time.